Michael, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you. How are you? Happy holidays. Season's over. That's sad, but good to see you, man. How are you?
Hey, doing good, Braden. I appreciate, I've had you on my show a couple times, so finally getting to make the return trip. Yours is, I do try to listen to as much SEC content as I can, and yours is one of the ones that's regularly on my beat. I've been listening not only your show but the Athlon Sports Podcast. I've been
Sure.
a loyal follower for years and years and years. So, man, it's great to be here.
The Mutual Admiration Society fully underway today on the show. No, it's great to have you. And I want to get into like a lot of we're already starting to see a lot of transfer portal stuff. It's hard to keep track of all of it. We are taping this, of course, on Tuesday around lunchtime. And same thing with the assistant coaches. We're already seeing coaches making big moves. A lot of SEC East coaches are going to have to figure out what to do with their offenses. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But just real quickly, you see the playoff put out. Georgia clearly 13-0, clearly number one. Stetson Bennett's going to New York as a Heisman finalist. Any issue with what the playoff committee gave us or who's in New York as a finalist for the Heisman right now?
Well, starting with the playoff, Braden, I think they got it right. But I should add, I don't like to – I do talk a lot. I run my mouth. I got a big mouth. But I also like to be honest. And I almost specifically follow SEC football. So I probably couldn't name you 10 players on Ohio State and Michigan's roster combined. But having said all that, Alabama, Tennessee, I mean, I think those are your two teams you could maybe have a debate for, but I don't think either one of them deserve to be in the college football playoff, not in a 4-team format. So I got no issue. I don't think TCU, I did get to watch the Big 12 championship. Championship weekend's about when I start watching the other teams just because there's only one SEC game on, but I don't see how you knock TCU out with a overtime loss, which hell, they got stuffed at like the 1 yard line. Yeah. That's the difference between making the college football playoff. I don't buy that. From what I understand of Ohio State, I realize they got destroyed by Michigan, but other than that, I think they've been fairly dominant in a lot of their ball games. So, yeah, I got no issue with the 4. As for the Heisman, man, you can't say anything bad about Stetson Bennett without people jumping on you. But is he really one of the top 4 players in the country? I would say no. And Caleb Williams, he's probably going to win it, probably because the votes come in before championship weekend. I think that's ridiculous. I think Hendon Hooker, you can make the case, was the best player in the country for probably 2/3 of the season. Why is he not there? Why do we only have 4? That's another issue for another day. But yeah, I mean, I don't even think Stetson is the best player on his team. And I don't think anybody, even the biggest Georgia homer, would tell you that. So I don't think it should be a career achievement award. I think Stetson Bennett deserves a statue outside of Stanford Stadium when his career's done, particularly if they win another national championship. But he's not the most outstanding player from the SEC, no.
Here's what I say. Yeah, I agree with you on that, actually. Here's what I would say about Georgia. Jalen Carter is the best football player on the team. Brock Bowers is the best athlete on the team. And Stetson Bennett might be the most valuable player on the team. That does not make him the best football player on the team.
Yeah, I mean, no debate there. And hell, you could throw in about a dozen more Georgia players before you get to Stetson, and that's no disrespect.
Right.
Everything I say, see, it sounds disrespectful to Stetson. He's just on a team with 20 guys that are going to be in the NFL next year.
Can you imagine Bryce Young running that offense with those weapons this year? I mean, give me a break. Give me a break with that crap. Now it sounds like we're ripping on Stetson. To your point, like it sounds like we're ripping on Stetson. He's a great player. He's a great quarterback, extremely efficient, has a chance to win 2 national title rings. That's all you need to say. You don't have to. You can stop right there and just be like that. That's it. All right. When you look at these teams in the East, Tennessee obviously a really great season ahead of schedule with Josh Heupel and Hendon Hooker. South Carolina way ahead of schedule, 2 straight years under Shane Beamer with a bowl game. Kentucky has sort of established itself, and now all 3 of them are going to have to replace probably their quarterbacks for sure and their offensive coordinators. Some by choice, others not so much. What do you make of those 3 teams? All of which are pretty solid programs in the East now, established themselves as, I don't want to say contenders with Georgia, but that second tier of teams, a couple huge wins for all those programs. What do you make of the jobs that those coaching staffs are going to have to do this offseason? Who has it the toughest? Who has it the easiest? Who do you think can solve those problems?
I'd certainly say the toughest right now got to be Kentucky, with losing a generational Will Levis. I kind of kid when I say that. I don't like to sit here and bash you guys, but all
I can
that
see
was
the tongue.
overblown.
I can see the tongue in your cheek.
Very, very solid college quarterback, tough as hell, made some plays when they had to be made. So they just don't have another guy on their roster. I mean, we saw against South Carolina, they had to play without him. They looked terrible. Now, that's not to say, I would imagine they got to be a prime candidate to add a transfer quarterback, maybe Devin Leary, someone like that. I think I just spoke with Stephen Lassen, your guy there at Athlon Sports, said Leary, not that he will go there, but he would be perfect for what they're trying to accomplish there. If they get a big time quarterback, that'll solve a lot of the issues. But I'm a little concerned with Kentucky because I'm the guy that I picked him 5th in the East at SEC Media Days. I thought I was drunk as hell down there. You can attest I was sober. At least
no, I can't. I will not attest to that, but I will attest that you said that and that I disagreed with you.
Yeah.
Like most of us thought, oh no, that they're a little bit better than that. And no, listen, I was dead wrong about South Carolina and probably Kentucky as well. You were right on with Kentucky.
Right. And so, I mean, it just feels like we've hit a ceiling there. I mean, this was supposed to be the year. We got all the pieces, yet we can't get it done. We had a great defense. They've been building and building, Braden, to having a quarterback and having receivers. They got that now. Now they don't have an offensive line. I mean, it's a nightmare, and that's what they're supposed to be built upon. Stoops is out here saying, we'll rebuild the offensive line via the transfer portal. Well, good luck with that, because every college football team at the Power 5 level wants help on the offensive line. So you're in a dogfight if you're going to try to fix it via the transfer portal. I think South Carolina, it's interesting. Marcus Satterfield, I don't know. Did he finally figure it out? I don't have much faith in that guy. I think losing him is a plus. We'll see who they get as their next offensive coordinator. I think that was more about Spencer Rattler finally trusting himself, pushing the ball down the field, letting it all hang loose, because they had nothing to lose against Tennessee and Clemson. But at times, I mean, SEC football is so wild, Braden. I mean, what was it, 43-6 before that Tennessee game? They got shellacked by Florida. I would even throw Florida into this conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it just goes up and down. But I think the team that's got it the best is clearly Tennessee under Josh Heupel. Now, I should say I'm a Tennessee grad, so take my opinion of them with a grain of salt. But another conversation I had with your buddy Stephen Lassen there, I mean, he just kind of crystallized everything. We're sitting here debating Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee and their stature in the SEC. Yet if you just put these rosters together on a piece of paper and looked at them, there's one outlier, and it's Tennessee. Their roster is not even close to either one of those two. No. Yet they competed with them because I think Josh Heupel's a brilliant play caller, and I think Hendon Hooker was just sensational. I think he's the most efficient quarterback in college football. That's a major, major loss, no doubt. But everywhere Josh Heupel's been, he gets these quarterbacks to play out of their mind. I think it would be unfair to Hendon Hooker to suggest they'll just have another guy that does that. But what I do think could happen is the roster continues to get better. They're recruiting well. Tennessee has positioned itself outstandingly in the NIL game. So I think they're going to be very attractive in the transfer portal. We'll see who they add here. But, if Tennessee gets close to the talent of Alabama and Georgia, I think their ceiling is sky high.
It'll be interesting. Obviously, Alex Golesh, of course, a part of that as well. But we know it's Josh Heupel's offense. So when Shane Beamer's never called plays and when Mark Stoops is the defensive guy, there's more pressure on the decision who they're hiring on the offensive coordinator, whereas Heupel has a lot more weight that he can pull in sort of the offensive room and sort of help with the departure of Alex Golesh. Jimbo Fisher, same thing, of course. They move on from Darryl Dickey at Texas A&M. Is this a fixable problem? Is this a fixable solution, or are you buying that all the turmoil under Jimbo Fisher at Florida State is what's happening now, and that are they just a good offensive coordinator and some patience away from being, a contender in the SEC, like we've been saying literally for the better part of 5 years now?
Darryl Dickey was the problem. Get his ass out of here. I mean, they're gonna be fine now. No.
Yes.
I tried to tell you, Braden, and you weren't buying it on the J.E. Dunn Twitter Spaces Monday, right after Sam Houston week 1. We were kind of debating Texas A&M, where they belong in the power rankings in the SEC. I had them like 10th, and my God, were Aggies mad at me. I hate Jimbo. I hate their culture. I hate everybody from Texas. No, I just call it like I see it. And from week 1 till basically the LSU game, I mean, that offense was just disastrous. I mean, we don't have to. We can go on at length about it. Everybody knows about it.
Right.
The offensive line was supposed to be a strength. That was a disaster. Quarterback after quarterback. The only thing they had was Devon Achane, and you got to assume he's off to the NFL unless they give him a massive NIL deal. And still, I would tell him to go to the NFL. But it remains to be seen because A&M. I'm done burying them. I'm back on the bandwagon, Braden. I got to get these people reeled back in. It's the off season of hype, just like it is every year with Texas A&M. If they hire a competent play caller, I think that's another one. They could win the SEC. They could win the national championship. They have the talent, and they've got a quarterback now. They've got some great receivers, but having the ability to hire an offensive coordinator is one thing. They have that. Can they attract one with Jimbo letting go of the reins of the play calling? I think that's the biggest question mark of the offseason. Again, is a Garrett Riley going to go down there knowing that if he has one bad game, Jimbo could yank that thing from him and start calling plays, and he's just a Daryl Dickey 2.0, so to speak. So they're in a tough spot because Jimbo answers to nobody. He doesn't have to answer to anybody. He's got 80, 75 million next season just waiting for him. So it's an interesting position. If Jimbo will do what needs to be done, A&M can be a contender, not only for the SEC, but the national championship.
Hugh Freeze, you like it?
Gus Malzahn 2.0, but with baggage here. No, hell no, I don't like it. I mean, what are we sitting here talking about? He beat Alabama twice. Oh, that's outstanding. But he also lost to Vanderbilt twice. He lost to Memphis, and this was not like rebuild Ole Miss. This was a 10-win Ole Miss. I mean, he's a good coach, and I think he will be, a man on a mission to prove, because this is his final shot. If he blows it at Auburn, he's never getting another great job, obviously. So Auburn's got the fan base. They got all the resources in this new NIL era to compete with the big boys in the SEC. So, I kind of kid. I mean, I think it could be disastrous. I think it could be great. Either way, it's going to be entertaining as hell. But I think he'll have his moments, but I don't think they'll ever win the SEC because, again, I think he's Gus Malzahn is what he is.
Yeah,
and
like you said, with more stuff.
Right. I mean, all the stuff he was doing at Ole Miss, aside from the burner phones, it's all legal. So, I mean, they could do it. They'll encourage it on the planes. He'll be fine, but
yeah,
I don't know. I just don't like him personally. It's kind of hard for me to overlook that, but he is a good coach, not an elite coach.
Are there bowl games that you are like genuinely interested in? And I don't mean like in the general sense of like, hey, it's a football game. We all love football games. We're all going to watch every football game. That sort of goes without saying. The outcomes of these games don't really mean a whole lot for any of these programs moving forward or backward. Having a winning season is important. I get it. But really, it's about the practice time, and it's about the paycheck, and it's about being on national television and selling your brand. But right now, coaches are focused on recruiting. They're focused on the portal. But so outside of just sort of like base layer of interest in games that we're not going to have for like 7 months, is there a matchup, a game that you are genuinely excited about from an SEC standpoint?
Certainly Tennessee and Clemson, I want to see for a number of reasons. I mean, with the opt-outs and everything, the bowl games have lost some meaning. It's all about the playoff, not for me, but for a lot of people. But this is the biggest game, I would say, in a lot of Tennessee players' lives. Outside of, Alabama was huge, Georgia was huge, but maybe beyond those two, this is the biggest game a lot of these players will ever play in. I think it's vitally important, Braden, that Josh Heupel and company figure out what they got in Joe Milton.
I agree with
because they just won 10 games. If they go back to 8 or 9 next season, I mean, the fan base is going to be pissed. And it'll be because Joe Milton can't lead you to the promised land. The expectation on Rocky Top now is to compete with Georgia, to compete with Alabama. You just beat Alabama. I don't want to say you went toe-to-toe with Georgia, but few did. So, taking a step back because your quarterback is not nearly as good as Hendon Hooker is not going to be an excuse that fans are going to give him. So I want to see what Joe Milton looks like in this big game. I really want to see, the Liberty Bowl, Arkansas, Kansas. So much hype, so much enthusiasm with Arkansas, and at times it seems like the team kind of quit on Sam Pittman. Not the entire team, but there's factions of it. There's rumors of turmoil in the locker room. I believe they lead the SEC right now in players that have left for the transfer portal since Monday. That's obviously not a great sign. So will this team lay down? Will they show up? That's kind of vitally important to me to see the. I mean, I certainly don't suggest you fire Sam Pittman. He just got a contract extension, but if they get blown out against Arkansas, he's probably going to be entering the season on one of the hottest seats in the SEC. South Carolina, Notre Dame. I want to see if the Gamecocks can keep this momentum rolling. Not that losing it's going to kill you, but this staff did a heck of a job. If you remember last bowl season, Braden, they were big underdogs. North Carolina had their quarterback returning. He was one of the ones people assumed was going to opt out. So you imagine North Carolina was going to roll them. It was the exact opposite. I think it was 21-7. 28-7, something like that, right out the gate. And that was a springboard to this upcoming season. So those are probably the three games outside of the playoff that kind of intrigued me the most.
So a couple quick comments off of what you're saying. I think 1,000,000%, what does Joe Milton look like against a good Clemson defense is critical. I think if you think Tennessee fans expect 10 wins, they better prepare themselves for disappointment, because Joe Milton is not Hendon Hooker. They lost their offensive coordinator, and you already alluded to it, their roster is not close to the rosters that are at the top of this conference. So they better be prepared for a step back without arguably the greatest quarterback in most efficient quarterback in program history. I'm interested about Sam Pittman, though, because I think a lot of their struggles had to do with injuries to KJ Jefferson and their schedule. They lost a lot of players in the secondary early in the year. They played a very difficult schedule. Hugh Freeze was trying to win a job in that game, and then they destroy Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. So I'm not sure hot seat is how I would describe Sam Pittman. Are you genuinely concerned about Arkansas's future long term?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not me going hot, hot button topic or anything, but I'm generally hearing this from a number of Arkansas people in the media, from the fan base. I mean, they're fed up. They had a 9-win season. This is SEC life. You go from 9 wins to 6. We got to fire everybody. They hate. I don't.
They won like 3 games in like 3 years in a row combined, and now they're going to fire a guy.
Maybe try to talk some sense into these great Razorback fans, Braden. They hate Kendall Browse.
I agree. I actually agree with that. I would move on from him. I would move on from Kendall Browse. I think he's the weakness. I think Barry Odom is the strength. So.
Well, the defense was a lot worse than the offense. No, I injuries were certainly a part of that, but. I mean, I've seen the numbers. I mean, they're like 50th in scoring and this and that and yada, yada, yada. Well, they've got arguably the 6th best roster in the West. Their starting quarterback missed 2 games, should have lost 3. I mean, there is some questionable play. There's questionable play calling in because we remember the times they don't score. We don't remember the 40 times they do score, and we don't give them props for that. So I don't know. I think with the talent that he's working with, we just had the number 2 rusher in the SEC, KJ Jefferson. He's one of the most dynamic players in the SEC. Kendall Browse doesn't get all that credit, but he's got to get some credit for that.
That's fair. I think going into the season, how about this? Going into the season, the only question I had, or maybe the minor thought that could hold them back, was the design of the offense. I think. In the coaching circles, I don't think Kendall Browse's scheme is as respected as certainly is not as respected as Barry Odom. But I do think a couple of those losses, like I think they beat LSU if they've got KJ Jefferson, for example. So I think a couple of those losses, you could point to the fact that their star quarterback wasn't playing, which I would argue is the case for almost everybody in the league. So, all right, when we're going into the offseason here, what is the story that we've got a month to go before the playoff. What is are you focused on recruiting? Are you focused on the portal? What is the thing that will define the SEC over the next 2 or 3 weeks before we get all the way to New Year's Eve and we're actually and Georgia's playing in an actual championship caliber football game?
It's probably the portal, because we just seen what that can do for LSU, what that can do for Ole Miss. I thought Ole Miss potentially would be a train wreck this season. I know it didn't finish the way they wanted, but that was major. And that's not to say you just add guys and you're solid, because Alabama added some guys. It didn't quite pan out for them. So I think Florida, that's another one I keep going back to. I know they had a disastrous season. I don't think it's going to be pretty for them in the Las Vegas Bowl against I think number 14, Oregon State, with Florida's had 2 quarterbacks leave the program in the last week. They got 11 days now as we're recording to get ready for that football game. So it could be disaster there. That's going to be a black eye for Billy Napier. But, just turning over that roster. How does Hugh Freeze turn over the roster at Auburn? I think that's going to be interesting. What does Georgia do at quarterback? What does Alabama do at quarterback? What does Tennessee do at quarterback? I think these are things that have yet to be determined that could dictate how next season in the SEC is decided.
Fascinating just to hear you kind of talking through Georgia. They're part of it. They've obviously recruited. They got a bunch of 5 stars at quarterback on the roster. But to think about a team going into a playoff game that hasn't played that game yet, that is already planning right now to work the portal for a position next year, that's a totally new thing. Like all the other teams are playing in bowl games that don't actually have an impact on, it's not a championship, but Georgia's got to play in a real football game. And Kirby Smart has to spend a couple of his weeks worried about portal players. I mean, it's and recruiting early signing period. I mean, it's fascinating how much we're putting in there in December. So it'll be fun to watch. That's for sure.
It's a train wreck of just scheduling, Braden, with high school recruiting, the portal, bowl games, the coaching carousel. I don't know why they jam-packed it all into this window. I like the fact that they are kind of putting it into windows, but they would certainly do guys like you and I a favor if they spread this out over 2-3 months, give us something to talk about. You know what?
Michael, thank you so much, man. Always a pleasure to talk with you. Of course, check out all of his work across that SEC podcast. You got the YouTube page, the pod, you got the social accounts, all the good stuff. You can catch him everywhere, so make sure you check it all out. Michael, thank you so much. Happy holidays, and we'll talk soon, all right?
Absolutely.